Today I'm flipping gel printing upside down. I'm building multiple layers on the plate, letting some dry, keeping one wet, and pulling everything in a single magical pull. Watch how this tricky technique creates amazing depth. So what are multi-layers with a single pull? What does that mean? That means we're going to put down layers and we're going to let each layer dry. We're going to put another layer down and we're going to let that dry. We're going to pick up in between with some deli paper or tissue paper if you don't have any deli. We're going to use stencils. And in the end, we're going to pick up with a single layer of wet paint. Okay, so that's what this technique is. I love this technique because it does what I call the subtractive method. When you have a dry layer, and in between you're pulling another wet layer that you're going to let dry, but you're using a stencil. It pulls some of that first layer off. Then maybe you do a third layer with another stencil. So we're going to do two of them where we use 3 stencils, and then we pull on the 4th layer, which is just going to be wet paint. And then I'm going to do a much simpler one in the end where I'm using my Sharpie marker, which I love, and that will be just a 2-layer. So it'll be the Sharpie marker will be the first layer, along with, I'm going to push some paint through a stencil. Second layer, we'll be pulling some of that through a stencil, and then the 3rd layer will just be the paint. So we're going to do 3 different prints. We're going to use rice paper, and let's stop talking and let's get to it. Okay, so today we're going to use an 8x10, and we're going to use this Yasutomo paper. It's called sketch paper. It's a rice paper, 9x12, and I'm going to just pull out a couple of sheets right now. We are also going to use, I like deli paper. You can use wet strength tissue, any kind of tissue really. I have about 4 sheets of deli paper that I'm going to use as my interim pulls, where we're going to let each layer dry in between. So when you're doing this technique, you have to think that your first layer is going to be what you see on top. And your last layer is going to be your background. So this layer here is Payne's Gray. And that's because I wanted something dark and contrasty more towards the top. And I'm using these 2 masks, and I'm just going to pick up the part that I don't want onto it could be tissue. In this case, I'm using my deli, and I'm now left with a ghost. I have to let this ghost completely dry, and once it dries, then I can do the 2nd layer. I use Nova Color paint, so it's dry already. It dried in less than a minute. I'm now going to use this blue mixture that I mixed up. It's a cerulean blue with some white. And obviously, while it's still wet, I'm laying down another stencil. Now I'm going to take that same deli paper. No need to ruin another piece of paper. Let's see if this paper can be interesting as well, multi-layered. And you'll see that I picked up some of that first layer. And as you can see underneath, we've got a more interesting combination of the 2 stencils. So now again, I have to wait for it to dry. This is the part that is a little bit frustrating because you're sitting around watching paint dry. I mean, that's not fun for anybody. But this paint dries pretty quick, so it's not going to be too bad. Every once in a while, I touch it, still wet. You have to be careful. And then I lift it because I'm imagining how wonderful this print's going to be. But I'm going to add another stencil, so it's going to change once again. So this time I'm using, it's a Naphthol Crimson mixture that I added some white to, and that's on the right hand side, and quinacridone purple on the left. Not so sure about this combination, but we're gonna try it. And I'm blending a little bit in the middle. And now I'm using a very different, this one's more linear, the other ones were very curvy. And now we've got, really straight lines. Again, I'm picking up with the Deli. And we're getting a very complex Deli paper. I'm just trying to get a cleaner result here. So now we've really changed the look a lot. It really looks different than it did just a minute ago. Okay, so this I think is layer 4. I've lost track. Yeah, so we've already used 2 masks in the beginning, and this is our third stencil. I mean, our second stencil. So already we've got 3 layers. I'm going to take some white paint and mix it with this teal color, lighten it up just a little bit. And then we're going to put down our rice paper, smooth side down. And here's where I wait about 2 minutes, somewhere between 1.5 to 2 minutes for the kind of paint that I'm using. So if you're using a very fluid paint that dries pretty fast, that's really all you need is 1.5 to 2 minutes. Now look at this Deli paper. It's so complex because each time we pulled in between, we got a little bit of the layer below. Okay, so after waiting the 2 minutes, let's take a look. My table's so dirty you can't see just how clean my plate is. Now, using the stencils that I used, you never would have thought, right? Now, the last stencil that we used ended up being the dominant one, so think about that when you're doing this. So now we're going to reverse the process. We're going to do the same color, similar colors. We're going to start with the Payne's Gray, but instead we're going to reverse the way we use the stencils. I'm going to use that last stencil first this time. Clean piece of Deli. And we're going to see how different the result is when the order of the stencils changes. And once again, we have to wait for this to dry. Once I've picked up through the stencil, the ghost has to be completely dry. Either that or we're going to smear it when we put the next layer down, and we don't want to do that. Each layer needs to be completely dried so that it's a nice crisp result. And I'm going to use a different curvy mask this time. And now that my ghost is dry, I'm going to lay down some teal. We're going to use that same Deli paper again and go over and pull through this stencil. So I also love the Deli papers in the end, and they frequently go into collages. And look at how interesting that looks. All right, let's see if we can peek underneath. I like how you see, how we pulled. I call this the subtractive method. I don't know if I mentioned that. When the second layer pulls from the first layer and changes how that stencil looked. And it's always unexpected. So we have to wait for this to dry, of course. Okay, so that was our second layer that we've just completed. Now we're going to go back to the Naphthol Crimson mixed with a little bit of white. And we're going to lay down the masks. And the other one, this was our first layer. This one is our last layer. This is going to be very different than the last print we made. And I love this Deli paper. So I decided to leave that messiness in the background because I think it's going to add to that very last layer. So now we have to let this completely dry again, but look at how different that looks. You could tell, right? All right, so now I'm going to let it dry, and then we're going to pick it up with this lighter teal. Okay, so it's dry. I like to use my final layer. I like to have colors that have a lot of titanium white in them because it really helps pull. Those opaque colors help really pull the whole thing together. Okay, so once again, we're going to wait 2 minutes. Okay, well, I got distracted. My phone rang and I waited a little bit longer than I should have. So there's 2 little spots where paper was left on the plate. You can see there's little white spots. So that's what happens when you leave it too long. Now, people ask me all the time. I see other artists that pile books on top and leave it overnight. It's if you have really, really thick paper. These rice papers and thinner papers you need to pick up sooner. And I left that second one, the one on the right, probably like more than 5 minutes because I was on a phone call. But see how different they look? Same 3, well, 2 of the stencils were the same, but look at how different the results were. Okay, so here on this third one, we're going to only do 2 layers. On the first layer, we're going to draw with a Sharpie marker. This is a Magnum Sharpie permanent marker. Yes, your plate will come clean. You need to learn about baby oil or hand sanitizer. On the right-hand side, I'm doing the marker. On the left-hand side, this was like actually a stencil that accidentally happened because one of my masks didn't completely cut. And I like to use these odd shapes by pushing the paint through the stencil. And this is Payne's Gray. So now I have to wait for both the paint and the marker to completely dry before I do my next layer. And this is going to be a 3-layered print as opposed to a 4-layer. So my third layer is just going to be paint, like I said. And we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to use white on our second layer. So I'm just curious if this is going to work. Sometimes I like to use white, and even though it's an opaque color, because we brayer it kind of thinly, it has a little bit of a transparency to it, and I like the lightness of it and the almost kind of blurriness that it brings. I don't know if blurriness is the right word, but it's very ethereal looking. And look at how fabulous that Deli paper is. Okay, so now you can really see how the stencil laid over the marker and those other shapes is now broken up by that stencil pattern. And again, we have to wait for it to completely dry. I mean, now that this is the third time you're seeing this process, so you should get it by now. Dry, first layer. Second layer, dry. Third layer, dry. Fourth layer, wet. Then you pull. In this case, there's 2 dry layers and then we're going to pull with a wet layer. So look at how fun that is. And it appears to be dry. So I'm going to pick it up with the quinacridone red. And I'm going to add a tiny little bit of Indian yellow to it just to warm it up a bit. So you don't always have to pick up with a opaque color. You can pick up with a transparent color as well. Again, rice paper, we're picking up with rice paper. And this rice paper is not too thin. There are some rice papers that are super, super thin, and you might not want to use this technique with that kind of rice paper. It might stick to the plate. And I really do love this paper. So look at how nice that's going to be in a collage over a colorful paper. And it will go totally transparent. It's going to be fabulous. And even these more dense Deli papers that still have a little transparency, they're going to be fabulous as well. Okay, so let's wait for this to dry and then we'll pull. Okay, so this time I set my timer 2 minutes. And wow, I love black, white, and red. That's a powerful combination, I think. And the Payne's gray almost looks a little black, but isn't that fun? So the marker, you could do just about any kind of design on the plate. I would break it up with the stencil. I just think it just makes it more fun. Okay, so these Deli papers really came out great. Now this one here has 3 layers on it, I think. And this was the result, the final pull. Look at how different they look and just fabulous. Now the second one, we have this paper and this paper. We had 2 Delis, and it resulted in this one. Not as, I think the first one came out better. But I do love that Deli paper that I'm holding with that one. Oh my goodness, that one I'm going to definitely use somewhere. I just love that paper. The red one's pretty good too. And this one is fabulous. I absolutely love it. Love my Sharpie. Always enjoy this. The subtractive method really pops when you've got black or a really dark color. So as you could see, that's where it picked up. That is a good example of the subtractive method. So I'm happy with all of my prints. Okay, I hope you enjoy this. So why do I think it's important to learn this particular way of gel printing? Because you get different results. I mean, these results are very different than layering one on top of the other, and picking up each time. You get very different results. And it's because it's subtracting some of the previous layers. And you get really unexpected things happen. And as you could see, because the first 2 prints I did were basically using almost the same stencils. I think there was 1 stencil I swapped out. Same colors, but in different orders, and how different those results were. So this is an important one to at least try. If you don't enjoy it because of the wait time in between each layer, you gotta wait for it to dry. I hear ya. I'm not a big fan of that either. I have no patience for that, but I do love the results. So give it a try. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something new today. And don't forget to create, inspire, and share. And I will see you next week. All right, bye-bye.